Great Scams: How Con Artists Changed History. Throughout human history, there have been individuals who devised astonishing schemes of deception. Their actions shaped people's destinies, dismantled financial empires, and even influenced the course of history. These scams amaze with their audacity, scale, and often unexpected endings. In this article, we will delve into the largest frauds that shook the world and explore how con artists turned their ideas into true legends. Victor Lustig, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower. Victor Lustig, a master of deception, is best known for selling the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal, not once, but twice. His scam went down in history as one of the boldest ever conceived. Posing as a government official, Lustig convinced scrap metal tycoons that the tower needed to be dismantled. He organised a fake bidding process, leaving the lucky buyers with nothing but shattered dreams. After fleeing abroad with the money, Lustig later repeated the scheme. Although his con was eventually exposed, it remains a symbol of unparalleled audacity. Frank Abagnale, Catch Me If You Can. Frank Abagnale began his life of crime as a teenager. His extraordinary talent for forging documents allowed him to pose as a pilot, doctor and lawyer. Abagnale forged checks worth millions of dollars and travelled the globe using fake identities. His exploits inspired the film Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Eventually captured, Abagnale turned his life around, becoming a security consultant and helping banks and governments prevent similar crimes. Ferdinand Demara, the fake surgeon who saved 15 lives. Ferdinand Demara, known as the Great Imposter, posed as a surgeon aboard a military ship during the Korean War. Despite having no medical training, Demara successfully performed several life-saving operations, studying the necessary procedures from textbooks right before surgery. When the deception was eventually uncovered, Demara avoided prison. His story became legendary, and his incredible intellect and composure remain a subject of admiration. Christophe Rocancourt, the fake Rockefeller. Christophe Rocancourt impersonated a member of the wealthy Rockefeller family, deceiving people across the globe. By charming his victims and presenting himself as an investor, Rocancourt swindled them out of their money. Even celebrities fell prey to his schemes. Rocancourt was arrested and sentenced to prison. His audacity and manipulative skills cemented his place as one of the most infamous con artists in history. George Psalmanazar, the fake cultural witness. In the 18th century, George Psalmanazar posed as a native of the island of Formosa, modern-day Taiwan, spinning elaborate tales about the culture of his invented people. He fabricated a fake language, rituals and traditions which European audiences enthusiastically accepted. His book about Formosa became a bestseller. Though his deception was eventually exposed, Psalmanazar remains one of the most enigmatic figures of his time. Milli Vanilli, the duo that couldn't sing. In the late 1980s, the musical duo Milli Vanilli took the world by storm with their hits, until it was revealed they hadn't sung a single note of their songs. During a concert, a backing track malfunction exposed their lip-syncing, sparking a global scandal. Their awards, including a Grammy, were revoked. This incident became a lesson for the music industry and a reminder that true success cannot exist without genuine talent. Ferdinand Demara, the fake surgeon who saved 15 lives. Ferdinand Demara, known as the Great Imposter, posed as a surgeon aboard a military ship during the Korean War. With no medical training, Demara performed several successful life-saving surgeries, studying procedures from textbooks just before operating. When his deception was uncovered, he avoided prison. His story became legendary, celebrated for his extraordinary intellect and composure. Cassie Chadwick, the illegitimate daughter of Andrew Carnegie. Cassie Chadwick went down in history as one of the most inventive con artists of her time. In the late 19th century, she convinced wealthy bankers and investors that she was the illegitimate daughter of Andrew Carnegie, the famous industrialist and philanthropist. Chadwick created fake documents to prove her claim to Carnegie's multi-million-dollar fortune. Using this ruse, she secured massive loans she never intended to repay. Her scheme unraveled only after a major financial scandal that rocked the banking world. Chadwick was arrested and convicted, but her story remains a symbol of how persuasion and manipulation can deceive even the most powerful. Mary Baker, Princess Caraboo. In the early 19th century, Mary Baker pretended to be Princess Caraboo, a mysterious royal from a faraway island. Drawing inspiration from exotic tales, she invented her own language, customs, and backstory. Her ruse began when she appeared in a small British town, claiming to be a rescued foreigner. Locals, including aristocrats, believed her and provided her with a luxurious lifestyle. However, after several months, a servant recognized Mary and exposed the truth, leading to a major scandal. Baker escaped serious consequences, and her story remains a fascinating example of creativity and manipulation. Wilhelm Voigt, the captain of Köpenick. In 1906, an unemployed cobbler named Wilhelm Voigt bought a captain's uniform and took over the town treasury office in Köpenick, Germany. Using his uniform as his sole proof of authority, Voigt gave orders to soldiers and marched out of the treasury with 4,000 marks. Voigt was eventually arrested, but his audacity turned him into a national hero, and his story became a beloved part of German folklore. George Salmanazar, the first witness of Formosan culture. Anna Anderson was one of the most famous women of the 20th century to claim she was Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov, the daughter of Russia's last Tsar, Nicholas II. Her story began in 1920, when she declared herself the miraculous survivor of the execution of the Romanov family in Yekaterinburg. For decades, Anderson tried to prove her royal lineage, drawing the attention of nobility, the press, and the public. Despite her striking resemblance to the Grand Duchess and her knowledge of intimate details about the Romanov family, many doubted her authenticity. Prolonged legal battles yielded no definitive conclusion, and later DNA tests confirmed she was not related to the Romanovs. Anna Anderson's story remains one of the most intriguing hoaxes of the 20th century, highlighting the power of belief and the human desire for miracles. George Parker, the master bridge salesman. George Parker was one of the most audacious con artists in American history, famous for repeatedly selling iconic landmarks, including the Brooklyn Bridge. Parker convinced his victims that he held legal rights to these structures. After the sale, the new owners often attempted to charge tolls for crossing the bridge, only to be stopped by the police. This outrageous scheme made Parker a legend among swindlers. Despite his arrest and conviction, his name remains synonymous with extraordinary ingenuity in the world of fraud. Charles Ponzi, the creator of the pyramid scheme. Charles Ponzi became the namesake of one of the most infamous forms of fraud, the Ponzi scheme. In the early 20th century, he promised investors an incredible return, up to 50% profit in just 45 days. His operation relied on using funds from new investors to pay returns to earlier ones, creating an illusion of success. Ponzi deceived thousands of people, amassing millions of dollars until the scheme inevitably collapsed. His arrest and imprisonment were widely publicized, but his legacy endures as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and blind trust. Today, such fraudulent schemes are still referred to as Ponzi schemes. Soapy Smith, the king of street scams. Jefferson Randolph Smith, known as Soapy Smith, gained fame in the late 19th century for his street cons. His signature scam involved selling bars of soap with alleged cash prizes hidden inside. Smith claimed that some soap bars contained banknotes, but only his accomplices ever won. Crowds of deceived people fell victim to this trick time and again. Smith later established a criminal empire in Colorado, using his charisma and cunning to maintain control. His influence grew so strong that he effectively ruled the town of Skagway until he was shot during a confrontation. Soapy Smith's story remains a symbol of street-level scams that escalated into large-scale fraud. Eduardo de Valfierno, the man who stole the Mona Lisa. Eduardo de Valfierno, also known as the Marquis, masterminded one of the most infamous art thefts in history. In 1911, he orchestrated the theft of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa from the Louvre. The crux of the scheme was to create multiple perfect replicas of the painting and sell them to collectors as the original. The real Mona Lisa was stolen by Vincenzo Peruggia, while Valfierno profited from selling the fakes. Although the original was recovered 2 years later, Valfierno avoided prosecution by staying out of the spotlight. This heist not only brought global fame to the Mona Lisa, but also became one of the most ingenious scams in art history. James Hogue, The Art of Deception. James Hogue was a master con artist who used psychological manipulation to exploit people for his gain. With charm and wit, he persuaded his victims to invest in non-existent businesses, sell their property, or even change their wills in his favour. Hogue meticulously planned his scams, studying his target's weaknesses and exploiting them with precision. His schemes were complex and highly effective, but the truth eventually surfaced, landing him in jail multiple times. Despite his criminal record, his remarkable talent for persuasion continues to fascinate. Robert Hendy-Freegard, The Secret Agent Fraud. Robert Hendy-Freegard posed as an MI5 agent, deceiving numerous individuals into believing they were in danger from terrorists. He manipulated his victims, convincing them to follow his instructions, hand over large sums of money, and even cut ties with loved ones. Freegard built trust with his victims before exploiting their fears and sense of duty to maintain control over them. He was arrested and convicted in 2005, but his methods remain shocking for their cruelty and psychological sophistication. Bernard Kornfeld, the investor con artist. Bernard Kornfeld was one of the most notorious financial fraudsters of the 20th century. In the 1960s, he founded the Investors Overseas Services, IOS, promising enormous returns through overseas investment projects. The scheme resembled a Ponzi structure with payouts funded by new investors. Kornfeld lived extravagantly, surrounded by luxury and women, until the fund collapsed in the early 1970s, leaving investors with massive losses. He was arrested and convicted, but his life of excess and audacity remains a striking example of greed and ingenuity. Sergei Mavrodi and MMM, The Legend of Financial Pyramids. Sergei Mavrodi became the face of financial pyramids in the 1990s with the creation of one of the largest schemes in history. The company promised investors astronomical returns, allegedly backed by successful ventures in stock markets and business. The scheme was simple. Funds from new participants were used to pay earlier investors until the pyramids collapsed. In a short time, millions of people invested their savings in MMM, hoping for huge profits. When the scheme fell apart, losses amounted to billions of rubles, leaving thousands of families destitute. Mavrodi was arrested and convicted, yet his legacy remains divisive. Some view him as a brilliant fraudster, while others see him as a hero who attempted to beat the system. Norton I, the self-proclaimed Emperor of the United States. Joshua Abraham Norton, a 19th century resident of San Francisco, declared himself Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Though his claim was entirely fictitious, he became a legend due to his charisma and sense of humour. Norton I issued imperial decrees, which were published in newspapers, and even printed his own currency, which local businesses gladly accepted. His persona symbolised absurdity and satire, and after his death, thousands of people attended his funeral. David Hampton, the fake son of Sidney Poitier. In the 1980s, David Hampton gained notoriety as a young con artist who pretended to be the son of renowned actor Sidney Poitier. Using his charm, he infiltrated Manhattan's elite circles, gaining access to upscale restaurants, luxurious apartments, and financial support. Hampton deceived the rich and famous, convincing them of his prestigious lineage and fabricated financial hardships. His story inspired the play 6 Degrees of Separation, and his name became synonymous with sophisticated and theatrical scams. Florian Homm, the financial illusionist. Florian Homm, a former hedge fund manager, rose to infamy for his ability to obscure the true financial state of his funds. His schemes included stock manipulation and attracting millions of dollars from investors. Homm vanished abruptly in 2007, leaving his clients to face financial ruin. His dramatic disappearance and eventual capture drew global attention, serving as a cautionary tale of greed and high-level financial deceit. Madame Rachel, the perfume con artist. In 19th century Paris, Madame Rachel, the owner of a luxury perfume shop, deceived her clients by promising eternal youth and beauty through her products. Her cosmetics, allegedly infused with magical ingredients, were nothing more than counterfeit concoctions. Rachel convinced countless women from high society to spend fortunes on her elixirs. When her fraud was exposed, she lost everything. Her story remains a classic example of exploiting human fears and desires for personal gain. Joseph Weil, the conman who fooled Mussolini. Joseph Weil, one of the most infamous American con artists of the early 20th century, used his cunning and charm to swindle money from even the most powerful individuals. One of his boldest scams involved Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Weil convinced Mussolini of the existence of a fictitious American company capable of supplying large quantities of weapons and ammunition. Using forged documents and accomplices, he secured a hefty advance from the Italian government before vanishing without a trace. This scheme highlighted Weil's exceptional skill and the vulnerability of even the most powerful politicians. His story remains one of the most striking examples of international fraud, where wit and audacity triumphed over common sense. The Gochman hoax: how Odessa merchants fooled the Louvre. In the late 19th century, Odessa merchants known as the Gochmans pulled off one of the most sophisticated art scams in history, deceiving none other than the Louvre. They sold the museum counterfeit ancient statues masterfully crafted as replicas. To convince museum officials of the authenticity of their artifacts, the Gochmans fabricated a story about the statues being unearthed in ancient Greece and secretly smuggled out of the country. They bribed experts and forged documents to back up their claims. The deal was completed, and for years the statues were displayed as genuine masterpieces of antiquity. The truth emerged decades later, but the Gochmans escaped punishment, cementing their place in history as masters of deception. Corneille Savin, also known as Count de Toulouse-Lautrec, was an exceptionally skilled con artist operating in Europe in the early 20th century. His schemes revolved around posing as a member of a noble lineage, granting him access to high society and enabling him to extort money from unsuspecting aristocrats. One of his most audacious exploits involved the sale of non-existent land and noble titles, which he eagerly offered to wealthy individuals seeking status. Savin employed forged documents, his natural charisma, and theatrical flair to persuade his victims of his legitimacy. His crimes were uncovered years later, but by then Savin was already enjoying the fruits of his scams. The story of Count de Toulouse-Lautrec serves as a reminder of how far con artists can go by exploiting humanity's desire to belong to the elite. Each of these stories is not only a testament to human ingenuity, but also a reminder of how deception can alter destinies. These scams demonstrate how blurred the line between brilliance and crime can be. The most important takeaway is to learn from the mistakes of the past, remain vigilant, and always remember, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.